Hey, it's Erica Stankwytch Bailey here of Metal and Mineral. I just wanted to do a sort of a quick video, hopefully. I'm pretty chatty. Um, that talks about my work just a little bit, does a really mini demo, but just speaks to the process maybe a little bit bigger. So what I'm going to do is just start with a couple samples of my work. I tend to use a lot of polygons and geometric forms in my work, a lot of angles, and that comes from an obsession really with the crystalline structure of the gemstones and the metals that I use. I have, for the majority of my creative career, been really interested in the building blocks of things. The foundations of my work was very cellular for a while. And now I'm just really, like I said, obsessed with crystalline structures and how things grow and why they grow. So what I thought I would do is just share a couple pieces. I'm going to try to use my hair as a backdrop. Anyway, this is an example of these silver frames that I will build. The geode, which is again a silver frame that I've constructed with this one has apatite, which is a naturally occurring gemstone on the inside. I really love the process of building these frames. We'll talk about that a little bit today, and also just the bold and strong effect that they give. Another example would be this one. Let's see if I can get control here. This is another of the geode series, hexagonal structure, which is really one of my favorites. That's spinel, that gemstone inside the geode component. Spinel's beautiful black stone with a lot of great flash. So anyway, there's an example. These guys are new. This is a new design. This one has blue sapphire. It's this nice tiered, but it's still working with those angles and those polygons. And also been really working on introducing some movement into especially my earrings lately. But also, I make work like this, work with cabochons, not that geode style. And what I find that happens is that I will often find these incredible, like this is apatite again, I will find these incredible gemstones, but they may not be cut exactly the way I want. Rounded edges, for example, which is not exactly what I'm looking for. So I started to realize that I could create these angled frames, and that when I set those stones inside those angled frames, I was achieving that visual language that I look for, which, like I said, lots of polygons, lots of geometry. So this is what I thought I would talk about today when I have a gemstone, a rounded cab specifically, that I'm going to set into a more angular frame. I've been really into, for a long time, this stone. Let's see, I think the light's hitting it nicely. This is called solar quartz. Solar quartz is really interesting stuff. It always has this center core because that's what forms the gemstone in the first place. They're often both translucent and opaque, and I have really enjoyed working with solar quartz over the years. I got my hand on a trio of these beautiful solar quartz cabs, and if I'm being completely honest, I've been sitting on them for a while, so I thought it would be fun to work on a project using these guys. But again, because it's round, it doesn't exactly speak to the way that I normally work. So I wanted to incorporate some angles. And so what I'm going to do is set this guy inside of a hexagon. The setting style that I'm going to use is a bezel. So I've already created the first step of making this bezel. So bezels kind of fit over a stone, and it'll eventually, when I get this whole thing soldered together, it will hug the stone and hold it in place. So that would be sort of step one. Choose my stone, cut my bezel, and solder it, okay? So that's the step one of our cooking demo jewelry demonstration. The next step is that I want to create that angular frame that we talked about. I use sterling silver, and I'm going to be using this really beautiful, very straight, makes me very happy, strip of sterling silver. I went ahead and pre-measured because I don't feel like measuring is the most exciting part of a jewelry demo. So I know that I need a hexagon that has 13 millimeter walls. So I'm going to use my ruler, it's a favorite of mine, and the Sharpie, and I'm just going to mark at that 13 millimeter mark. I am currently using a black Sharpie, which I use Sharpies a whole lot to make marks on my metal. But over the years, what I found, excuse me, is that black doesn't really work all that well. It tends to dry out. My favorite is actually a royal blue Sharpie. So for anybody out there doing any metalsmithing, get you a royal blue Sharpie. They're the best. Fine tip. Okay, so I'm just marking these off. 13 millimeters, 6 sides, because we're doing a hex. Okay, and I don't know if you can see those little hash marks that I made, but those are my measurements. And then I'm just going to use this little square to make sure that I'm marking my line where I need it. And then I'm perpendicular to the edge of that strip, because if I do not cut and score perpendicular to the edge, what I'm going to end up is a frame that doesn't lay flat, and that doesn't really suit me at all for this project. Now, oftentimes I can use that to my advantage, but this is just not one of those times. So the little square comes in really handy, and like I said, I'm just marking with a Sharpie. Last one. Okay. So you can see there what I've done. Okay, so this is the only portion that I need, and then I have this whole long piece that's excess. So I'm going to remove all that excess now so that it's not in my way. And to do that, I'm just going to use my jeweler saw. This is one of my favorite tools, and this particular saw I have probably been using for about 20 years. So can you see that little blade on there? So I'm going to saw through this material. Okay. Get my excess out of the way. So now we've got our little piece. There's a ton of different ways that you can score and bend. And let me explain to you, I guess, two things: what I mean by scoring and bending, and also why it's necessary. What I mean, I am going to remove a little bit of silver where I drew each of these lines, so that when I go to bend, I will get a nice crisp angle. Otherwise, I'd get kind of a rounded bend, and that's not what I want. Scoring and bending is important, I guess. Same thing. I'm removing the material so that I can get that really nice crisp angle. If I didn't, I would get these rounded angles. I certainly use them sometime in my work, but typically when I'm doing the geodes, I want that nice crisp edge. So anyway, there's a bunch of different ways that you can score and bend. I've done many over my career, but as of late, I've been using a cutoff wheel. I don't know if you can see that thing. I use this cutoff wheel to kind of establish my lines, and then you'll see I'll hit it with the file in the end. Safety first, right? Got to wear my safety glasses. Over all the years of doing these frames, I've definitely learned to tell by sight how deep that I need to cut this through. The polygon or the angles that you need would definitely require how the depth of the groove. For example, if I wanted to make a square, so I needed 90-degree angles, I'd be cutting much more deeply than I am for the 120-degree angles that I need for a hexagon. You can see a bit there what I've done. I've just created these little grooves. Okay, so like I removed material so when I go to bend, it will bend more easily. Those grooves right now are round, which is not what I'm looking for, so I'm going to pull out a triangular file. I'm not sure. Let's see, oh, there we go. Okay, and I'm just gonna hit those a couple of times with that triangular file to make sure that I have what I need. Doesn't take much. So one of the interesting things about this process is that I've now removed a bunch of material from each of these areas that I intend to bend, and sort of like the same thing. You know, like you've taken a paper clip in your life and you've bent that paper clip several times and eventually it'll break. Well, sterling silver will do the same thing. If you continue to move an area over and over and over again, it will eventually break. So one of the interesting parts about this is that now that I've got these grooves cut, oh, you can see that I already bent it a little bit. I don't get to bend and rebend and rebend. I kind of have to commit to what I'm doing. And then I can fudge it a little bit. But if I just keep opening and closing, I will definitely break one of these joints. So let me grab my pliers. Let's see. And now that I've established those scored and bent areas, it's really easy for me to bend this and get these really nice, crisp bends. I'll be the first to admit that this might not bring everybody in the world a lot of joy, but every single time that I get to this step in this process, I get really, really excited. It just feels so clean and like things are always falling into place the way that I want them to. Okay, so you can sort of see here that I've got the beginnings of that hexagon. Nice, crisp angles, and still quite a bit of work to do. The thing about silver solder is that it needs a really nice clean joint, so I've got to do a lot of cleanup on that thing to get it right for soldering purposes, but at least you got to see how that scoring and bending happened. So if I did my job well, I'm going to be able to slide that stone with the bezel setting inside of this hexagon that I've created. And that's going to be the beginning of this ring design. Okay, so luckily I did my measurements correct. And when I get this thing all ready and finished, I'll be able to set that, that silver quartz right there in the center. I've skipped a couple steps forward, so we would imagine that I've cleaned up, then soldered that hexagon, then I would clean it up again, and then I would do some hammer textures. Then I would take that hexagon that was hammer textured and soldered, and that bezel wire that's been soldered, you can see that, and I would solder that onto sheet, okay? Onto a flat piece of silver sheet. And that would yield, after some sawing and cutting, something a little bit like this. So I have that frame with the hammer texture. Inside is that bezel. I saw it out of shape because I want to be able to allow some light through. And eventually I will finish this and it'll be a piece of jewelry. The really, really nice part about this is because I drilled this hole here, I sawed this hole out, I can put my stone in to see how it fits. If I didn't have some way to push the stone out, I could not put it in at this stage because it might get stuck and then I can't solder anything else on. So I'm just gonna pop that stone in, boom, so you can start to get a sense of what that's gonna look like. Anyway, I really love the process of metalsmithing. I think it's so amazing because it's oftentimes intuitive, but it's also so well planned. What this may become, and to be honest with you, I'm not 100% sure at this step. I'm thinking it's going to become a big old ring because that's what I've been into lately. And when I make rings like this, what I really like to do is create a band that mirrors some of the visual components that I have on the front, as well as is really comfortable to wear. So what I have here is an example of a ring that I've made. It's a beautiful ruby doublet. Similar characteristics. It's got a stone that's not angled as much as I'd like, so I've set it inside that that hexagon. This is also bezel set. You can see that wrapping over the edge. But what I really want you to see is this frame as I explain that I like those bands to be wide at the top and narrow at the back. Some components from the front. There's your hexagons, same hammer texture as we would find up here. Thanks so much for joining me, and I hope you're having a wonderful day, and take care. Bye.